Week 9 in the Always Sunny in Sayreville League, and it's getting late early out here. This is the weekly update. Okay, we're entering the final stretch of the season. 4 games left before the playoffs start. The top 4 playoff spots look to be pretty locked up, but anything could happen. You'll see what I mean in a minute, because right now we're going to take an in-depth look at the league as it stands. Stat room. Yeah.
Holla.
Hi. Welcome to the stat room. I holla back. We're going to take you through the standings in the league after 9 weeks with just 4 to play before the playoffs. As of right now, we have 2 7-2 teams. Toddler Fight Club, leading the Porter Division, can eliminate the Gotham Rogues from winning the Porter Division with a victory over the Gotham Rogues this weekend. That's right. The only thing that can happen is that the Rogues at 3-6 can't win the division if they go to 3-7, but they're still eligible for the playoffs. Everyone's still alive. Shower Hug, also at 7-2, leads the number 2's division with a win and the losses. With a win and a loss by loss prevention. With a win and a preventable losses loss. Over in the number 2's division, we have 7-2 Shower Hug. With a win this weekend and a loss by preventable losses, Shower Hug clinches the number 2 division and a first round bye in the playoffs. As it stands right now, we also have 2 6-3 teams. That is tight end to wide receiver and the Golden Showers. These teams are separated by less than 40 points. The other 6 teams in the league are currently fighting for 2 playoff spots. But anything could happen in the last 4 weeks of the season. Right now we have 2 4-5 teams, 3 3-6 teams, and 1 2-7 team. While this situation isn't very sexy, it's actually the best thing for all teams involved, as no one will be outright eliminated from the playoffs with a loss this weekend. Now, as I said before, it appears as though 6 teams are fighting for 2 playoff spots. But let's take a look at the landscape of the league after 9 weeks just 1 year ago. Last year, after 9 weeks, we had one 8-1 team. You may remember that was Toddler Fight Club. They were the last team to lose, and they looked like a very strong squad for most of the season. Well, Toddler Fight Club went 1-3 over the final 4 games of the season, losing the number 1 seed on the very last day and finishing as the number 3 seed. Toddler Fight Club lost in the second round of the playoffs. Last year, after 9 weeks, we had 4 5-4 teams. 3 of those teams made the playoffs. One of those teams was Team Blumpkin, who went on a 4-game winning streak to close the season, going from 5-4 to 9-4, and clinching the number 1 seed right out from under Toddler Fight Club on the last day. He had a first round bye in the playoffs, and then lost his first playoff game by a lot. The other 2 5-4 teams after 9 weeks last year were Shower Hug and tight end to wide receiver. Both teams went 1-3 over their last 4 games. Both teams finished at 6-7, and both teams snuck into the playoffs with the 5th and 6th seed respectively. Tight end to wide receiver lost in the first round of the playoffs, and Shower Hug went on to win the championship. You might be asking yourself which 5-4 team didn't make the playoffs last year. That would be the Gotham Rogues, formerly Vince Masuka. They also went 1-3 over the last 4 games. They finished at 6-7, and they were the closest team to making the playoffs without actually making the playoffs. Having the same record as Shower Hug and tight end to wide receiver, Gotham actually missed the playoffs on a points tiebreaker by a margin of 15.9 points. 15.9 points. That one roster move that you didn't make could mean the difference between making the playoffs and missing the playoffs. But just to point out that it really does come down to matchups and wins and losses, Gotham finished last season with 33.3 more points than the number 2 seed and 157.6 more points than the number 4 seed. Gotham's last loss of the season in Week 12 was by a margin of just 4.7 points. 5 more points that week, and Gotham goes to the playoffs. After 9 games last year, 2 teams were 4-5. Both of those teams made the playoffs. Kixon 6 took his record from 4-5 to 7-6, which was good enough for the 4th seed in the playoffs. And the Preventable Losses squad, formerly known as the Annexation of Puerto Rico, also finished the season 4-0, to go to 8-5, winning the number 2 division and clinching the number 2 seed and a first round bye in the playoffs. That's right, Kevin. That pile of shit lineup that you were looking at when you took over the team actually went to the Super Bowl last year. After 9 weeks last year, we had 3-6 teams. None of these teams made the playoffs, and they comprised the top 3 teams in this year's draft. But that result doesn't tell the full story, as the Golden Showers finished last year with a flourish, arguably the hottest team that didn't make the playoffs, and this year sits in prime position to finally pay a visit to that playoff party. No team can be outright eliminated from the playoffs with a loss this weekend. With a win and a loss by preventable losses, Shower Hug will clinch the number 2 division title, a first round bye, and no worse than the number 2 seed in the playoffs. Remember that the trade deadline is noon on November 13th, which is the Wednesday after the Week 10 games. So get all your wheeling and dealing done because time is running out. So those are the standings in the Always Sunny in Sayreville League after 9 weeks. Now, back to the newsroom for this week's hero. Alright guys, this week's hero. 4-5 team, and I think every time he's won a game, he's been this week's hero. Preventable losses this week. Down by 15.1 points going into Monday Night Football against a first place 6-2 division rival Golden Showers team. Preventable losses puts up 25 total points between Green Bay tight end Andrew Quarles and more notably Chicago wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey to secure the 10.4 point win in this week's closest margin of victory and a big upset along the road to the playoffs. This win knocked the Golden Showers out of a tie for first place in a game where Jordan Cameron only put up 1.4 points and Matt Ryan had his worst game of the season, only scoring 9. But preventable losses won. They claim right now the first wild card spot, and he broke his 3-game losing streak, largely due to the huge game from Andre Johnson, 56.9 points. And we'll get a little more perspective on just how big a week that was in a minute. And now, this week's GOAT. If you took a look at the matchup between What You Talking About Hillis and Shower Hug this week, and you saw what I have to consider the most disgusting display I've ever seen in fantasy football. This was Bobby J's lineup. Okay? Talking about 4 guys on buys. 1 guy scored a 0. 1 guy scored a 6.5. So for 6 lineup spots, that's an average of less than 1.1 point.
Holy shit!
Bobby J set a new standard in the Always Sunny in Sayreville League this week, week 9 of the 2013 season. This is a week that's likely going to go down in history as one of the worst weeks you could have as a fantasy football owner. Now, I talked to Bobby J via text after the game, and I was just relieved to find out that he was alive. And I told him that, Bobby, I don't even care what your excuse is. I'm literally just glad that you're alive. And I'm not even going to get into the, the whys and the what have yous and the wheres and the hows. It's not for now. It's in the past. It's in the past. But oftentimes, born in the worst situations are the most wonderful rewards. This is a record-setting week, history-making week in the Always Sunny in Sayreville League. This is not only the worst beating in the history of the Always Sunny in Sayreville League. Bobby J lost by a margin of 104.1 points. That's a record. I checked last year. That's official. That's a record. This is the worst beating ever. And as you may already know if you've watched the previous episode, the old record for the lowest score by a team in the Always Sunny in Sayreville League set by Bobby J last year was 58.3 points. This week, What You Talking About Hillis scored 52.2 points. That's a record. That's a record as a team. As we noted earlier, Andre Johnson scored 56.9. Just the guy. It also bears noting that Bobby J has both Reggie Wayne and Julio Jones on his bench. They're both on IR. They've been on IR. We've noted this on this show. They're still on his bench. We just saw the worst lineup ever score the lowest number of points ever in the worst beating ever. And for that, What You Talking About Hillis is this week's GOAT.
Holy shit!
Alright guys, key matchups. Speaking of What You Talking About Hillis, his next matchup is against the open slot in a game that has the utmost importance to both teams. Now, as we know, even an 8-loss team can make the playoffs this year, but it's going to be the most difficult thing possible. With a loss, the open slot would go to 2-8, and the road back from there can be very, very short. What You Talking About Hillis sits right in front of the open slot in the standings, so he's not in that much of a better position. And with that lineup, he needs to hope for the best. These are the two lowest scoring teams in the league. Hillis has lost 3 in a row, the open slot has lost 4 in a row. Something's got to give. The next key matchup is one I mentioned earlier. Preventable losses at 4-5 versus the Rusty Strombone at 3-6. This is a matchup of teams that are also right in front of one another in the standings. Last year, the Rusty Strombone was the first team eliminated from the playoffs. And this year, they're doing their best to make a charge late in the season. In fact, after enduring a couple of rough patches in the season, both teams are entering this game coming off a win. In this matchup, it's Peyton versus Cam. It's McCoy versus Peterson. These teams have a couple of big studs and a couple of guys who you can't even believe are on a roster. And both teams are hungry for a win in this number 2 division rivalry. The next key matchup also features one team that's chasing the other in the divisional standings. The 4-5 Team Blumpkin faces off against the Golden Showers at 6-3. The Golden Showers just lost a tough game to fall out of a tie for the division lead, whereas Team Blumpkin is entering this game coming off a win, and perhaps is starting another late season charge. And the game of the week this week, shoppers, is between the 6-3 tight end to wide receiver and the 7-2 Shower Hug. Shower Hug can be the first team to clinch a playoff spot with a win and a preventable losses loss. The Hug comes into this game on a 5-game winning streak, tied for the longest in the history of the league. In 2012, Toddler Fight Club won 5 games in a row between weeks 6 and 10 of the regular season. Tight end to wide receiver fell out of a tie for the Porter Division lead with a loss last week, but a win this week would mean more than just playoff position, as tight end to wide receiver looks to avenge a 3.6 point loss to Shower Hug in their only meeting last year. Alright guys, that's it. Week 9 update over. Remember to set your lineups, and remember that it ain't over until it's over. I'll see you next week, where it's always sunny.